The migrant crisis in the United States has finally reached a boiling point. Here's a few things you really need to know. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Chris Martenson here with another special report for you. Today, we're going to be making sense of the migration crisis or the migrant crisis. Now, let's start here. Amy Pope of the IOM, that's a UN agency, recently tweeted out on January 19th. She said, thanks to SRF and Sina Freiermuth for a great interview on state of the migration today across Europe. This was at the Davos conference. And she said, how migrants are a force for good, fueling economic growth and driving prosperity. Europe needs migrants, and migrants need regular and safe pathways so they can work. Now, here's one of the tricks that we have to be familiar with. One of the tricks deployed by the Build Back Better WEF progressive crowd is they like to tear down our statues. They like to eliminate our mooring in history doing that. And they like to blur and sometimes even entirely change the meaning of words. In this case, because there is a deliberate effort to make them interchangeable, we have to carefully reclaim the distinction between immigration and migration. This is something everybody should be familiar with. And once we do that, we next have to be sure we have the same definition of invasion. Okay. So what do I mean? This is immigration. Take a look at this. All right. That's immigration. I don't know, 40 boxes on there. This takes 3, 5, 7 years. There's forms at every step of this process. This is immigration. Immigration is what happens when a nation decides that they want more people to come in. It's no different than what you would do as a landlord who's going to rent one of your houses. It's your asset. It's your possession. It's a dwelling. You want to make sure that the people you're bringing in, of course, you would vet them to make sure they had a job, maybe do a background check, maybe a criminal check, call some references. You would do things. Same thing if you're hiring somebody into your company. Of course, you would vet them. Immigration is a vetting process. Migration is an uncontrolled process where just anybody who can get on a boat, cross a border, hop on a train, somehow scoot across a boundary that doesn't really exist, that's migration. Totally different. Immigration is not the same thing as migration. So this is important. Now, migration, we think about, birds migrate, all that. But what part of the definition for migration is movement from one part of something to another. So it could be the seasonal movement of animals, but it's basically a big group of animals, in this case, humans, going from one area to another. And they go, why are these birds migrating? Well, because they're going to their nesting grounds. Why are they going there? Well, because there's more food there. There's resources. Animals migrate because of resource issues. They have to get to water. They want to get to more food. People are migrating now because they're going from a place where they don't like their opportunities to a place of higher opportunity. I have no problem with that if it's immigration we're talking about. My grandparents immigrated into this country of the United States coming through Ellis Island. Total fan of immigration. I think it's awesome. You can bring in the people you need for the projects you need and for the future you want your country to have. It's a good process. Migration, totally different prospect. All right. So if we look at this, that's immigration over there on that side, and that's migration. Okay. Now, what's interesting is Governor Abbott of Texas just very recently, this was just yesterday, came out and actually invoked self-defense, invoking parts of the Constitution, citing invasion. He wrote here, quote, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and other visionaries who wrote the U.S. Constitution foresaw that states should not be left to the mercy of a lawless president who does nothing to stop external threats like cartels smuggling millions of illegal immigrants across the border. That is why the framers included both Article 4, Section 4, which promises that the federal government shall protect each state against invasion, and Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which acknowledges the state's sovereign interest in protecting their borders. The failure of the Biden administration to fulfill the duties imposed by Article 4, Section 4 has triggered Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which reserves to this state of Texas the right of self-defense. For these reasons, I have already declared an invasion under Article 1, Section 10. Okay. He's already declared an invasion. Game on, folks. This is a really big deal. This is one of the most significant constitutional crises and national crises that has happened in quite a long time. This could really maybe spiral out of control fast if things aren't contained. What do we mean by invasion? Okay, well, let's go to the definitions again. Make sure we're sharing same words because, again, I decry this effort to make sure that we no longer can share conversation because words get debased, demeaned, changed, claused, otherwise violated. Invasion, an instance of invading a country or a region with an armed force, okay? It's an incursion by a large number of people or things into a place or sphere of activity. Similar words might be influx, inundation, inrush, flood, deluge, and or it could be an unwelcome intrusion into another's domain. That could be a disturbance, a disruption, a breach. Does this word apply? I think it absolutely does. Know the difference. Immigration is a careful, thoughtful process. Invasion is an uncontrolled, absolutely thoughtless process. And that's what I would call migration and invasion. I mean, how would we tell this apart from an actual invasion? How would an invasion look differently than this? This is the infamous train of death coming up from Mexico. By the way, as I've noted before, you might notice a certain demographic similarity across the people on top of that train. Or perhaps here we might look at what's going on. This is in England, if you can believe it, last year. We might ask, is this an influx? Is this an incursion? Is this some sort of, has this been swamped? Do you notice anything, like maybe does this look entirely like the England you have in your mind of what the English culture looks like? Maybe not. So here you can see the English bobbies down there. The police absolutely swarmed, and obviously not in control of that situation. So how do I know? Let me tell you very quickly how I know a little bit more about this than I did just a few weeks ago. On January 15th, I flew down to Panama. I went deep into the Darien Gap. I didn't go. I was taken there by Michael Yan and Chuck and Matt and Jairo, and went there with a number of people: Ann Vandersteel, Mandy, Masako, and Brett Weinstein and his son Zach. So all of us were down there. So we went in there, and what did we do? We went to the Darien Gap. That's on the southern end. You see that red line coming down? Let me get my little laser pointer out here. This is the Pan American Highway. It goes all the way up to Alaska, but it stops here in Yavisa. And then there's this gap. There is no roads. This is a big open piece of jungle with mountainous terrain, not amenable to road building. And so this is the infamous gap that people walk through. So we drove all the way there, drove all the way to the end of the road, went out a little further, drove down to this little tiny town. Ooh, interesting. This little town out in the middle of the jungle in middle of nowhere has a Chinese sign. There's your first clue where we are getting to. There's myself and Brett Weinstein with his son Zach in the background. And we waited around for a little while. And then next thing you know, we got ourselves onto these things, long, skinny, literally dugout canoes, dugout boats with little 15 horsepower motors on the back. Piled ourselves in there, sat in plastic lawn chairs and the like. They did leak, so there was constant bailing going on. 4 hours up into the jungle we went, and when we got there, we found this camp. And this is the first camp that people who had just been walking through upwards of 20, 30 miles of jungle, this is one of the first camps they would have encountered. And Michael brought us to this one because this would have been a wealthier camp. This one had a shorter route that you could get to if you paid a little more, and that's why we would find a lot of Chinese nationals in this particular camp, which we did see there. Kind of looked like this. People would settle up in different geographical regions, so there might be a group of Venezuelans under one of these things sleeping in those tents. There could be in a different one Afghani people. We saw Chinese people. We saw people from Africa. We saw people from all over South America, Central America, you name it, right? Pretty interesting. And we were, of course, asked to hand over our passports to Senafront. Saw this sign there. We saw that last year, 68,079 people had been recorded as having passed through this particular camp. They stayed there an average of just a few hours or maybe a day or two, and then they would get on a boat. The boat would take them down to that landing. They would get on a bus at that landing. The bus would take them north to Costa Rica, and then they would begin their trek through Costa Rica, and then on through the rest of Central America, through Mexico, finally into the United States. That is the process. It looks something like this. There were Venezuelans under this shacky thing here with their tents. All of their clothes were spread out to dry. Their boots, which you can see up top of us there, they were still dripping. The laces were dripping down because they had just come out of their adventure of coming through the jungle and across that river that we motored up. At this camp too, guess what? Chinese signs there. So what is this migration all about? Why are these people coming? What is happening? This is what you need to know about. Of course, Amy Pope, who we started with in her tweet, this is the IOM Director General. You can see her there, and they very proudly at the IOM put out this strategic plan. It reflects the IOM's mandate to facilitate an orderly and humane management of international migration. They say they have wisdom and experience gained over 70 years with their ambition to apply innovative thinking for the benefit of migrants, their families, communities, and societies. Of course, part of that innovation thinking isn't how can we get these people to stay in their own country and have a better life there. Their entire focus is how do we create a route where these people can just very easily and more rapidly and in larger numbers go from country A into country B. Myself being a resident of country B. This is interesting. Look at their framing here. They say here, harnessing the power of migration. They don't mention immigration. Remember, now we know the difference between these two words. So harnessing the power of migration. What is the power of migration exactly? Because this is, to them, that's settled science. They've already agreed amongst themselves that migration is a good thing and it's always beneficial. Look at this. They say here, IOM knows that migration has the power to transform the lives of individuals, their families, their communities, and societies for the better. How do you know that? Is it always a good thing? I can think of lots of examples where if too many people from country A move into a region of country B, it's not awesome for the people there in country B. You might talk to the Native Americans about the migration of white people from Europe and the 16 and 1700s, for example. It's not, so this, IOM knows that migration has the power to transform everything for the better is a ridiculous statement, obviously. Next, they say here, it is clear that the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN cannot be reached without safe, orderly, and regular migration. For this reason, our vision is to deliver on the promise of migration while supporting the world's most vulnerable. And they say migration is an integral part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And they talk about all these different goals. By the way, it's an incoherent mess because on the one hand, they're like, oh, we got to care about climate change. It's one of their SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah, climate change. We've got to stop that. We've got to limit that. We're going to make sure that we press down and we have policies to make sure that we have less consumption by these carbon-emitting countries. Less. Oh, hey, let's take all these people who come from low-emitting countries where they have really low GDP and low carbon emissions, and let's take those same people and put them into a high-emitting country. How does that work? It's literally that brain dead, because you know what's going to happen? By default, because you're in a higher GDP country and you engage in that country, you take their buses and drive the cars and live in the houses and do all the things that go along with living in that other country, you're going to emit more carbon. So on the one hand, they're like, we have to stop carbon. On the other hand, we have to make sure that we move as many people as possible from a low carbon to a higher carbon country. It's a mess. Hot mess. Doesn't have to make sense. Hey, it's the UN. You know, what are you going to do? By the way, while we were there, Michael Yon had taken this little video here. So see if you can notice, if you feel like you're harnessing the power here, this was what it would look like when a group of migrants had come from a camp. Here they are being transported down the river to the landing where they're going to get on a bus. Let's see. Men. That dude in the military fatigues, that center front, they're great. There's somebody waving. Oh, there's somebody giving us the middle finger. I'm feeling the power of the migration already. It's astonishing that we're at this particular stage. Listen, that's all I can say here on YouTube because I'm very heavily censored here. I just got a strike a while ago. Who knows? Maybe I'll get another one here. I never know where the line is. So guess what? I'm going to call it here. If you want to hear and see and listen to all of my thoughts about this, we have a much longer, you can see it there. I won't even read the title out, right? Because, don't want to run afoul of anything. come by Peak Prosperity, of course, for free. You can watch the whole longer thing, and would love to have you there. Come on by, but increasingly, you're going to find my content on platforms, especially my own platform, where I can speak freely. So thank you very much for listening. Come on by Peak Prosperity. Love to see you there. More importantly, I would love to have your comments and your insights and your input back there at the site. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye.